boosting philanthropy support organizations' value. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge that we're very lucky to be doing this project in partnership with DAFNE, the Donor Foundations Network of Europe. And I'd like to read a little blurb about them. DAFNE is an informal network gathering donors and foundations associations in Europe with the aim of providing a platform to share knowledge and learn from best practices. With 25 member associations with a collective membership of more than 7,500 foundations and grant makers, DAFNE underpins individual activities of its members by encouraging dialogue and collaboration between the national associations. Each DAFNE member individually serves public benefit foundations and other donors at the national level. The roles and services vary from country to country. And we have WINGS. WINGS is a network of about 100 organizations supporting philanthropy in almost 40 countries. Our purpose is to strengthen, promote, and provide leadership on the development of philanthropy and social investment around the world. Today we will be talking about the 4 C's, and there are 2 components to the 4 C's that DAFNE and WINGS has been working on. There's the framework, which we will hear about today, and there's the Global Scale Rating Tool or app, which is a website. Both were launched at WINGS Forum 2017 in Mexico City. With us today, we're very lucky to have 5 people from the DAFNE and WINGS network. Esther Thompson will be moderating. We have 3 case examples from Eduardo del Rio from Spain, Alina Porumb from Romania, and Carola from Italy. And lastly, we will finish with a presentation from Barry Knight, a WINGS consultant, about the framework guide. And without further ado, I would like to pass this presentation on to Esther Thompson from the Association of Charitable Foundations.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Esther, as Sarah said, from the Association of Charitable Foundations in the UK. We have people joining us from all over the world, mainly from philanthropic infrastructure organisations and funders of such organisations. We will spend the next 60 minutes or so introducing a new enabling framework called the 4 C's framework. Before I start to explain the 4 C's and where it came from and what it is, we have a couple of questions to get a sense of where people are, which we would like you to answer. There is a box on the right that will appear on your screen if you're calling in with a computer. The first question will appear, and you can tick the box that best applies to you and press submit after you've ticked your box. I will close the poll in 15 seconds and then move on to the next question. We will now move to question 2. It's not yet appeared on your screen, but it will shortly. Okay, we will now close the poll. The results should come up in a second.
Esther, the results of the poll is that most people here in attendance, their work is truly global, so they do not fall into only one region. And 100% of attendees said that they find it difficult to articulate and demonstrate the difference that they make.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, it's welcome everybody from around the world. And in one way, it is quite good that you find it difficult to articulate, in the sense that hopefully the 4 C's framework will help you in that. So, what is the value of infrastructure support organisations serving philanthropy? as we've just discovered, this can sometimes be difficult to quantify. There are three things we know as philanthropy support organisations that we do. We support foundations to achieve their mission. We help foundations develop their practice. And we influence the operating environment of foundations. Exactly how we do these things and how we show we do these things are questions philanthropy infrastructure practitioners often find themselves trying to answer. It was recognised that much of the support we provide is not tangible. It relates to processes and relationships, and as a result, much of this invisible work is undervalued and underfunded. It was evident that there was a need for us to develop a framework for philanthropic infrastructure organisations to use to articulate and measure the field we are working in, and our poll has just shown us this. The 4Cs framework was developed to be a common global language you could all use flexibly within your own organisation. And now, in a shifting, changing world, it's becoming more pertinent than ever for us to be able to do this. Never before than now, we might say. We exist to strengthen civil society, and the context many of us are working in is under pressure. Right now, we need to come together and be able to demonstrate our value. We need to be able to respond to our changing context. All of this became the starting point for a joint WINGS and DAFNE emergent learning process, which involved 23 philanthropy support organisations, DAFNE and WING members from all continents, over an 18-month period, who through experience, adaptation and testing, and some blood, sweat and tears, has ensured that the 4Cs framework has been built by the field, as in us, for use by the field, as in you, and we will use it too. It will be continued to be refined and developed with your input. So, who were the reprobates who did all this working group stuff? On your screens, you'll now see a picture of us, and on that picture, are some people who will be talking today and giving their case studies. So we are now bringing the 4Cs framework that we all worked on for those 18 months out to you today to see what you think and to start introducing the language into our individual narratives. It is the first time this has been taken at a global level. So just to reiterate, there are two products, the 4Cs framework, which I'm talking about today, and the global scale rating app, which Sarah mentioned at the beginning. The 4Cs framework, which I'm talking about today, that's for your own use, for you to use for your own purposes. We wanted it to be very practical. And the app, the global scale rating app, collects data to allow us to compare philanthropic fields in different countries throughout the world. We need your input into that app whenever you want. So, I said it's practical. So what can you use it for? It has 4 main purposes, and we discovered this as we were working through it over time. It can help inform the planning of activities that you do. It can help to demonstrate and communicate the value that you add in your organisation. It can help you understand and help your funders understand and the world the difference that you make to the field of philanthropy. And it can help you learn and improve practice both within your organisation and within the field. So 4 things, 4Cs framework has got 4 things it can do. We try to keep it simple, and we think it is a thing of beauty now. Remember, you can use this as a way of describing the work that you do and or measure the impact, your impact upon the philanthropic field. We worked, as I mentioned, we worked together as a learning group, sharing what we do with lots of discussion, lots of post-it notes, describing what we do to one another, using the areas of common ground as well as our diversity to hone it down to 12 outcome areas under the 4 C's. So what are they? Capacity, that's the first C. This looks at the volume of philanthropy. What is the level that's being created and spent? It looked at the sustainability of philanthropy, if I could say it. Is there philanthropic investment for the long term in your country or area? And this C also looks at strategic philanthropy. How much commitment is there to philanthropy being delivered strategically within your country or area? The second C, capability. This looks inward in a way. Professionalism. How do your members function? For example, are there established standards of practice? Knowledge of philanthropy. Within your membership and beyond, how developed is the knowledge of the processes that are needed to make change happen? And last but not least, skills. What's the level of ability of philanthropy organisations or donors to apply their knowledge to reach their philanthropic objectives? The third C is connections. Communications. How effective is the field in conveying messages about philanthropy? Under connections is also collaboration. How well do philanthropic organisations and donors work with one another and others? And influence. What is their ability to inform policy in your area or country? And last but not least, the fourth C, credibility. This covers public support and engagement. Is philanthropy valued by the public? Awareness raising. Is there a wider understanding of the value and impact of philanthropy? And transparency. Is the philanthropic sector open to public scrutiny? So what you've just heard and seen, and this will be available on the website for later to come back to, it's the top level of the 4 C's framework. So just to go back and remind ourselves what you can use it for and what people have used it for to help inform planning of activities, to demonstrate and communicate our value, to understand the difference being made, and to learn and improve practice. So we're now going to move on to some case studies of people who've actually tried it. These are people from the working group. And first of all, I'd like to welcome Alina from Romania, who will talk through how she has used it in her work.
Hello everybody, it's good to be here and present our experience. The way we use it at ARC, it is to understand better the difference that our organization has made so far, and also to start a conversation in the team about where we would go next. Just a few background information about where 4C came in our planning activities. A few years ago, actually, we were using the outcome mapping as a methodology of figuring out where we want to go in each of our strategic areas. So basically, we had this groundwork that we could build upon. And that also meant that we already had some data gathered on these key indicators. So what we could do now with the 4C was actually to organize these indicators on each of the 4 C's. So other uses, basically we tried to reflect as a team on how we view the context of our work in each of the 4 C areas, and to look at connections between different programs. The way we did this was actually engaging everybody from the team to give a mark on how the context is in each of the 4 Cs. Some of the challenges we had was the fact that we already had good data about our organizational role, but there was not enough data about the context. And this is a challenge which in a development country like Romania is still going to continue. So a way of approaching this challenge is actually to partner with public institutions and other NGOs in order to be able to produce more regular data, not just ourselves, but with support from others, data about philanthropy. And the other challenge we had was to actually figure out where to put certain outcomes in each of the, in which of the Cs should we put certain outcomes, particularly when the approach would be, for example, collaboration, but the results would be in credibility, for example. How we are thinking to use it next is to engage ARC beneficiaries and partners to actually reflect together on the situation in Romania. So far we engaged the team, but we would like to broaden the circle. And also we would like to use this information as a basis for the next strategic planning process, which starts in 2017. And on the current slide, you see some of the examples of indicators we were using. For example, under the capacity, we were looking at our community foundation program and our donation mechanism program. And we tried to see in very specific terms how much money was generated through this program for Romania. And also, I just wanted to illustrate how we're visualizing some of this data that can show the progress through the years. So this has been our example, and I would like to pass it on to Carola from Assifero, Italy.
Thank you, Alina. It's Esther here again. Just to remind people, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A box. Thank you. Over to Carola.
Yes. Thank you, Esther. Thank you. So, Assifero, the National Association of Italian Institutional Philanthropy and Grant Foundation, we have 90 members. And actually, if for us, a moment as an association, we wanted to review the strategic planning. The first ever strategic planning that we had was from 2015 for 2 years. But we were in a new phase, so we wanted to have a midterm review of our strategic planning and to plan for the next 4 years, which is the time frame for the new board of directors and so on. So it was a key moment for us in order to engage our members in understanding the contribution Assifero has as an infrastructure organization. So the contribution we offer to the sector of philanthropy in the country, but also the difference we make. As already mentioned, it is not always evident, and the intangible outcomes in a context where maybe most of foundations are very small and of private foundations are small and so on. So either way, they should join Assifero or the value of Assifero in building a system of more informed, more connect, more effective system of private philanthropy in the country wasn't evident. So we were all about our very cheap membership fee, and with the didn't have it. So we really needed to take a step forward, and actually the fourth framework was a great way to engage our members in order to understand better our contribution as an infrastructure organization and the difference we make. The 4C framework was a powerful basis because, of course, you have this feeling of loneliness in the country, so really that you have to demonstrate. And how we did it, we started with actually 2 of the C's, which both Esther and Alina were mentioning the first, second, third, and fourth C's, while for us the 4 C's were really in a circle, in a mutually reinforced. And actually, for many reasons, we started with credibility and connections. So the work we did in our strategic planning review and in planning our 2020 strategic plan as Assifero was mainly focused on credibility and connections. So in trying to understand the difference Assifero is making in transparency or awareness, in widening the role and the impact of philanthropy in the countries, trying to have more public support and engagement in philanthropy, not only a foundation as filling the gaps of the welfare in Italy, but really trying to see the value, the strategic value of private philanthropy in the country, which is a cultural shift, quite relevant, and on connection. So on the influence we are trying to make, it was also due because in the last 8 months, a lot of energy was devoted to the legal reform, a new framework, a big framework law about sector and the non-profit in the country, and actually private foundations were finally recognized there in the third sector and not under the economic part and ministry. So it was great. It was very recent, but really trying to see how much connections and the role had influence in this law and policy was important. So I would say that even we do agree that the framework has these 4 C's. We started with concentrated on, so we have them, the 4 of them in the strategic plan for the next 4 years, but for the moment our indicators and the main priority were on really on and connections, and of course we know that we have to also enlarge capabilities and capacities in order to have a more informed and effective philanthropy in the country. this is it. The fourth framework was very powerful so far, showing our members that actually there were others around the world, so that even I mean, there are no competitors in the countries, but that we had belonging to this basis and framework was important in order also to compare with what others did. So, for example, that Canada also used the 4 Cs for the planning as a planning tool was very important to me to make the case for it with the board of directors and the members.
Thank you, Carola. Have you finished?
Yeah. For
Brilliant.
the moment, yes.
Really helpful. Thank you. Very interesting, and very interesting about that you focused on 2 Cs and not all 4 at once. So it has, I think you've shown in many ways through your rich presentation, there's lots of different ways you can use it, in the same way that Alina sort of mapped it out as well. So thank you, and now over to Eduardo from Spain. Eduardo?
Can you hear me? Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, hello everyone. Now, I'll tell you about our experience with the framework. The title is A Case in Progress of Simplifying and Selecting Indicators, because this is what it is, a case in progress. We haven't finished it. But what we did is, first of all, I translated into Spanish and distributed around the team of 5 the framework and explained it. So because an effort of let's say of teaching and of awareness is needed within the team, because if the framework is applied, it will provoke a big change in the work of the organization. So previous work is needed to convince people within, and once they were convinced, then we had a few meetings which were very interesting, because it helped us to discuss on possible indicators that would measure our work. Now, after those 2 meetings, what we discovered was that because of the enormous amount of data that our association can obtain, we needed an effort of synthesis, of priorities, of selecting the best indicators. If we try to put into practice all of the indicators that came in the first meeting, we would have been overwhelmed with information, and that information would be very costly to update. Thus, being the problem of a possible excess of information, the important task was to prioritize and to select out of all the indicators that we had proposed. And in that effort of selecting and prioritizing, we had a little problem, and that is that as an organization, we didn't have any strategic planning, a formal strategic planning, which would be a reference to say this outcome area should be more important than this other one. And so we didn't have that, because we have a very complex board of government, which has the board of directors has 26 members, and it has been very up to now very difficult to propose a formal strategic planning that would be adopted by this large group. But what we do have is something not as good, but something an approximation to that strategic planning, and that is strategic lines. With those strategic lines that we have in a few documents, what we're doing now is selecting which indicators and which outcome areas are a priority for us, and that is the work we're doing now. together with rewarding of some of the descriptions of the framework, because the outcome areas, even though they were defined by a group of peers from many different international organizations, we found that we needed a little bit of tailoring, of rewarding, so that they could fit into the specificities of our organization. So to finish, our case is still a work in progress, but our lessons to share with other organizations are that it's important, if you have access to a lot of information, to simplify and to select, so that the information that you will get will really help assess whether the organization is advancing in the way it has chosen. Second lesson is that the outcome areas are very useful because they serve as an international reference of other framework organizations, and thus they help to create a common language that will help to standardize language, not indicators, but language and outcome areas, and will help to understand each other across continents. And the third lesson is that some effort must be made to connect these outcome areas with the strategic planning or with the strategic lines of the organization, so that the organization will make it, will adapt the framework to its to its singularities, to its specificities, and that is the lessons that we would like to share with other organizations from Spain.
Thank you, Eduardo. That's really, really helpful. It sounds like you were talking about there was something important about convincing other people. So you took on the 4 Cs and then you had to translate it and communicate that within your organization. And I was quite struck by also your use of the 4 Cs and in prioritizing your work areas and using it to simplify and select the data that you needed to show the difference that you made. So thank you very much, and thank you to you all. And now over to Barry Knight, who's been working on the 4 Cs framework with us as a working group from the very beginning. I pass you over to him.
Hello, Barry here. Glad that everybody's on this call. I wish I could have greater interaction with you. The 4 Cs is really a framework that delivers professional support for people who deliver professional support services to strengthen philanthropy. It has been, as Esther said at the beginning, developed by the field for the field. One critical thing about it is that it is based on what philanthropy support organizations do. Before we started the learning, we actually looked at the annual reports of lots of different members of WINGS and DAFNE to isolate what they actually did, and we tested this out with their clients. So the 4 Cs is actually a system that has been validated both by people delivering the services and those receiving it. And in this slide, what is the 4 Cs? It's essentially an evaluation system. It measures the added value that organizations supporting philanthropy bring to the field of philanthropy. So what the difference is that the philanthropy support organizations make is actually on the field of philanthropy, which is really kind of critical. Moving on to the next slide, to what does each of the 4 Cs mean? Again, this came from an analysis of what support organizations are doing, and B, what their clients value. And really the issue about capacity is just the resource development part of the field support, how services range from training on fundraising and information on funds, fund sources, through building a culture of giving. So this is particularly relevant to some of the emerging market economies, perhaps less relevant to some of the more developed economies. As Carola said in her presentation, some things are more important to organizations than others. And for some organizations, capacity, the question of resources, will be less important. The capability is about skills, knowledge, and expertise. I mean, this is essentially about know-how, and is the stock in trade of what most philanthropy support organizations do in providing information, advice. They have knowledge on a wide range of topics like governance, management, evaluation, and legal stuff. And they deliver that through one-to-one advice, online resources, seminars, webinars like this one, peer learning convenings, and other means such as fellowships. So that's a kind of stock in trade, and I think that nearly every support organisation that I've come across in this field does something on that. Critical role also is about relationships in convening, networking, sharing, providing forums for action in pursuit of a common purpose. And of course, the act of bringing foundations together can create a virtuous circle in which the connections kind of reinforce the capability and capacity of the field. So these things are not separate categories, but they do run into each other. But again, bringing members together is a really critical part of the work. And then the final C, which is credibility, has actually jumped up the scale in the past few years with around the closing space debates. But this means the reputation, recognition, and influence that the field has, and helping the field to enhance its status with governments and wider society, helping philanthropy to disseminate its achievements and to advocate for a new fiscal environment. So that's that slide, and moving on to the next slide of what the 4 C's is and what it is not.
Barry,
yes.
It's Esther here. I'm just wondering if you could maybe step back a little bit from your microphone. It's quite a little bit distorted.
Okay. I'm afraid I'm phoning in. I couldn't dial in. I will. Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Okay. So what it is and what it's not. The group did not want to develop an inflexible log frame approach, which one size fits all. Throughout our discussions, and we had 4 very long meetings over a couple of days, it was recognized that philanthropy support organizations come in many different shapes and sizes, and that we needed a flexible system. So it is that. It's not a rigid one. We also tried to cover the entire territory, so it is comprehensive. I'll come on in a minute to the 12 outcome areas that we selected. But at the same time, it's not compulsory. As Carola said, you can focus on some of the C's and not others. It depends on what your organization priorities are, and they will differ according to where you are and what you want to achieve. And so it's an enabling framework, not a restrictive one. You don't have to go through and tick every box. And you can use different measures. As Eduardo said, the choice of the measures is crucial because you can't measure everything. And we debated long and hard whether there should be a standard indicator set for the 4 C's, and decided against that because that would diminish the creativity of the field and actually put us into a kind of box. We did think, however, that a standard language was really important so that the field can communicate with itself, so that people, as we heard earlier, people in Canada can talk to people in Italy, and we can't, but at the same time we couldn't aggregate results because we can't compare what happens in Canada and what happens in Italy, because they're in different contexts, they're at different stages of development, and there is no competition in this field. It is about a tool that's actually about enhancing cooperation rather than saying, hey, you know what, we're better than you. This is not what this is about. This is about finding a common language for the field. Moving on to the next slide, which is what are the key components of the framework. Each of the 4 C's we decided would have 3 outcome areas, which means that the system as a whole has 12 outcome areas, so that for capacity there are 3 outcome areas, for capability there are 3, for connections there are 3, and for credibility there are 3. And that seemed to reflect the work of the 23 organizations that took part in developing this. And we define an outcome area as a, open quotes, a zone where the support organization aims to make a difference. So this will be therefore determined by the strategic plan of your organization. So where do you want to make a difference? Define that, and that's your outcome area. It needn't correspond perfectly towards the guidance that's given in the 4 C's, because again, this is your organization, this is your evaluation system, you use it as you will. We have struggled with, I'll move on to the next slide, which is an example of an outcome area. This is just one of the 12. And here we've got, it's a capacity example. And our first outcome area is on volume of philanthropy is building resources. And that's what capacity does, it builds resources. So one of the things that we looked at, and this is a draft from the document itself, the overall value of financial capacity and resources relating to public benefit instrument or the use of private assets for public good. And this could mean things like foundation outgoings through social investment to grant making and giving by individual and corporate donors. Now, as I say, we resisted the idea of set indicators, but the next slide, which is called add-in performance indicator, I'm actually writing and drafting a guidance note for use of the 4 C's, and for each of the areas I've given some possible indicators. So in terms of the volume of philanthropy, you might want to measure the number of foundations. You might want to measure the total value of endowment of foundations. You might want to measure the average grant size of foundations. That may not work in a country like South Africa, where actually there are a large number of giving circles which are not formal foundations. So you might want to choose a completely different measure for that, for South Africa. And you know what, that's fine. Choose the indicators that you want that actually meet what you want to, your analysis of what the field needs. That's the critical part of this. Moving on to a second example, which is the next slide, which comes under capability, under professionalism, the conduct of philanthropy organizations and donors as established by standards of practice ranging from good governance through to operational behavior and performance. Again, I've given 3 possible indicators. There may be others. 1 would be the existence of a code of good practice for foundations. 2 might be guides to grant making available. 3 might be the proportion of foundations that have feedback mechanisms from their grantees. Again, they are just examples of indicators. They are not the ones that have to be used. You make the choices because it's your organization, it's your strategic plan. And so the flexibility of the system depends on what you want and what you need. And the next slide, I've actually set up 12 possible steps, which is based really on the evolution of some of the organizations that have actually pioneered this. And the 12 steps are, you know, a common number to get you off drink, but I hope this doesn't actually lead you to drink. But the first stage is just to decide to do it. The second example would be to get help. We're at the end of this webinar going to give you names of people who will help you, a kind of phone a friend, the 4Cs ambassador, because if we want this field to develop, we need to help each other and actually talk to one another. And I think talking to people, you know, whom you've heard today on the phone, like Alina and Carola and Eduardo, who have actually been there, will help you and encourage you. I think the third step is really important to decide, give somebody the responsibility of taking this forward within the organization. Somebody who is the kind of central figure who will lead this and talk to and be the person who develops the system. Fourth, take one step at a time. This can't be done in one go. It needs to be embedded into the organization and part of the processes of the organization. And each organization will be different. It will have different board meetings. It will have different staff meetings. It will have different engagements with its stakeholders and so on. I think one of the things we found was that start with the theory of change. What does your organization want to actually change? What are the outcome areas that you really want to develop, and how do you do that? That's a very good kind of starting point that will give you important clues to the change that you want to make. And then if you're not clear about what a theory of change is or how that works, then get some help and some support about that. And then figure out, once you've got your theory of change, how does that fit with the 12 outcome areas? And for each of the relevant C's, describe the state of the field. Where are you on your outcome areas, the key things that you want to change? Write stuff down, talk to people. And if you don't know things, move to stage 9. Decide how you're going to fill the gaps in your knowledge about the outcome area. And then from there, you can begin to devise performance indicators for each of the outcome areas that you want to change, and use the information you've gathered at stage 11 to develop a baseline system on the outcome areas that you want to change. And finally, to develop a system to monitor progress going forward using the performance indicators. And on to the next slide, you could think of some kind of simple planning tool where you've got the 4C in the first column, which outcome area that relates to in the second column, what are the objectives you're going to set yourself going forward, and how you're going to measure progress in the fourth. That's just simply one way of doing it. There may be many other ways of doing it. And then finally, to the next slide, what do you do with your results? Well, you can use them within your organization to review progress. You can share with your members, funders, and other constituents in a way of getting transparency and accountability out there to show how we're doing as a field. It could be used in an annual report. It can be used for convenings of various kinds. It can be used in problem-solving sessions and learning examples, and use it as a peer tool in peer learning with other support organizations, particularly with your fellow peers in WINGS and DAFNE, who, you know, part of the thing we're trying to do is to build the capacity of the philanthropy support sector, so it has increasing recognition in the world, so it gets a greater recognition and therefore more money, because at the moment people are not particularly keen to fund support organizations, and demonstrating added value is a way of doing that. And then finally, share with WINGS for so that they can upload it on the page. There is a page for the 4 Cs, which we want to become increasingly active. We'll be putting up the draft guideline that I'm writing, which we'll get feedback from and discuss that. As Esther said in the beginning, this is work in progress, and we want you to be part of that progress. Thank you. That's the end of my contribution.
Thank you very much, Barry. It's really, really helpful, and I hope people found that, saw things in there in Barry's presentation that they thought might be helpful for them. So, Sarah, are there any questions from the participants for us, for anyone on the panel today?
Hello. We actually have a few questions, but we are running out of time, so I will ask both of them at the same time, and then James, if he is willing, can start answering them, and anyone else can contribute as well. I just wanted to bring your attention to the screen before I ask the questions that the people involved in the 4 Cs are 4 Cs ambassadors, and if you have any questions or would like to embark on the 4 Cs on your own and are looking for some guidance, you can reach out to anyone on your screen, and their emails are below their names. So the 2 questions that we have to start are, when do I start work on the 4 Cs, and who from my team should I involve?
Well, hello everyone, and I'm pleased to jump in and try and address some of the questions, having followed the presentations there with interest from my colleagues. On the question of when to start, well, really, Barry set out, I think, quite well 12 steps, and you can see from that there's no time like the present. You know, you just have to make that decision to start. Certainly, there is no point until you come to the end of a program and then decide, right now it's time to do an ex post evaluation and try and retrofit the 4 Cs framework into that. It simply will not work, and we learned that actually through the peer learning process ourselves, that it was quite difficult to do that retrofitting. So I think there's no time like the present. It is one step at a time. You don't need to take on the whole thing, as you saw from the presentations. In some cases, it might be, well, let's look at a couple of the Cs initially, or it might be, let's discuss this with colleagues so that we can identify initially what our theory of change is, or where do we have data, where do we have the required information already being gathered by the organization. So I think that then links a little bit of when to start is how to start and who to involve, which is the second question. And initially, as we had with our peer learning group, we had people that were already engaged in some form of either strategic planning or some responsibility for assessment of what their organization does. So they had some sort of technical knowledge, let's say, of the outputs and outcomes of their organization. And that's a helpful starting point. But it is really critical, I think, as Eduardo said in his presentation, and I know Esther had the same experience, and Carola and Alina, that it's really important to involve other colleagues, because that discussion has to take place as to what is appropriate to measure within the organization. What data do you have? You don't want to have to start to set up new methods for gathering data, complex systems, and so on. So that is helpful by having that discussion with colleagues about what indicators would be possible on the basis of data that the organization has access to. And just one final thing in relation to who to involve, it's sort of a slightly different take on the question, is does this relate necessarily to members only of your own association, or is it wider? Well, that depends on what data is available. So, for example, in the UK, there is very, very good data on the top 300 foundations, and that is beyond the membership of ACF. Most of them are members of ACF, but it is not data that is gathered by survey by ACF, which would be a long and laborious and difficult task in itself. So there's no need to do that. If there's data available from a third source, use that data. Involve those who can contribute appropriately to the process and give you the result that you want, rather than try to set something else up yourselves.
Thank you, James. That was really helpful. And now I'm going to hand back over to Sarah to finish the webinar. But thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and I hope it's been helpful. And I'd just like to reiterate that we are available. So there's a slide up at the moment with our ugly mugs, might say, pictures of us. Feel free to get in touch, and we'll help where we can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Esther, for moderating, and for everyone for giving your case studies and examples, and James for answering the questions, and to the many more people who are involved in the 4Cs process. You can get a recording of this webinar on the WINGS website, and it will be emailed to you if you registered for this webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Muy bien.
Thank you.